If you like to read, if you like to think, if you like to see the world differently, grab yourself a book, give this show a listen. Purple Lit Nerd gonna show you what you're missing.
I'm laughing at myself over here. Welcome to the Purple Lit Nerd podcast for April the 7th, 2018. I am your host, the amazingly adorable Rebecca Thistle, podcasting to you live-ish from my kitchen/dining room table in my apartment, which I call Jeffrey Thistlework. Yes. So what was all that about? Well, there's no, sound on my soundboard for squee. Why am I squeeing? Because we're talking about sonnets! I say we as though it's just more than me, but I love sonnets. Oh my god, I love sonnets. I was, in preparation for the show, because I kind of know the history of sonnets, but I wanted to make sure I had all my facts right, and some names and stuff, so I sound way more intelligent than I really do. So I was on YouTube looking up the history of the sonnet, and I was listening to a lecture from a scholar, and she starts talking about, the lyrical poetry that is the sonnet, and I'm going, yes, you are saying everything I want to hear, please say more, oh my god, total nerdgasm over here, so I'm really excited. So, what is a sonnet? I guess that's the first question we need to address, is what is a sonnet? A sonnet is a 14-line poem, and it is lyrical poetry, because I think the essence of lyrical poetry is that of reflecting on a moment. I've often called sonnets in particular lyrical snapshots, because it in 14 lines you're capturing a moment, just a fleeting moment, and by the time you're able to write it down, the moment's passed, but you're writing it down because you don't want to forget that moment. So, I think lyrical poetry is some of the most mindful and aware out there, because it's just, let's take a moment, let's immortalize it. Let's take a moment, let's take a feeling, let's take a problem and a resolution and immortalize it. So, this month is actually National Poetry Month, which is why I decided to do sonnets. I was going to do sonnets in February, but then I was like, no, I don't really want to do sonnets in February. I want to do the help in February. So that's part of why I'm doing sonnets this month, because it is National Poetry Month. But also the 23rd of this month is Shakespeare's birthday. So, hello. You gotta give it to Big Willie. Oh, he's my homeboy. I say that like I'm some kind of nerdy badass. I'm not. So this week, I want to really, just kind of give you a brief history of the sonnet that will bring us to Shakespeare. Because after Shakespeare, it's just sort of like, yeah, you're all copying him. Fuck off. Well, no, not really, because a lot of, Enlightenment and so on, Romantic period, a lot of poets after Shakespeare really went, no, we're not going to do what Shakespeare did. We're going to go with Petrarch. And I'm just like, you bastards. I mean, big props to Petrarch, but we'll get into that. And so this week we're going to talk about kind of the history of it. And then next week we're going to talk about the actual format, the actual method to the madness of sonnets. What? There's madness in sonnets? Yes, there's always madness in sonnets. So what's the history of the sonnet? I'm going to try very, very hard to get as many names right. I will not try as hard to get dates right, okay? Because I am of the opinion that history should be a story. That's why the word story is fucking in the word. Or in the fucking word, I guess would be the right way to say that. So to me, dates are sort of like a secondary thing. So, side note about dates, because you come to this show for randomness, right? In the Iron Druid Chronicles, what I love about that book series is the story, first and foremost. Well, actually, let me take that back. What I love about the Iron Druid Chronicles, first and foremost, is the Iron Druid himself, Atticus O'Sullivan, with his dog, Oberon, a close second. But the story is what has me losing my mind. Because I love it. The dates and times and timeline for the story are kind of like this secondary thing. Like, I kind of like figuring out, okay, so Atticus, or as he was, his birth name was actually Sheahan O'Sullivan. When was he actually born? So when would he have done this, and when would he have done that? And we meet him in 2010 or 2011. And in the initial 3 books, I guess it is. So then this book must have taken place at this time, and this book must have taken place at that time, blah, 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 blah. So that's kind of like a mental exercise, but it doesn't diminish in any way my love of the story. So that's how important dates and times and stuff are to me. The story and the people are what's important to me. So, like I said, gonna do everything I can to get the names right. No guarantee on the dates. You can always do what I did, which was Google it or look it up on YouTube or whatever. There's a lot of good information out there. I just present it in the most amazingly adorable way. And that's why you listen to this show, right? Ready? Let's do this. Oh. So, the sonnet actually, this I seriously just learned today, despite taking a course in Shakespeare twice, actually. The sonnet actually originated I knew it originated in Italy, but it actually originated in the court of Frederick II in the late 13th century. He had a notary whose name I have heard about 5 times during my research, and I still cannot remember it. It's like, I keep going to say Jacques Cousteau, but that is not right. So this notary in his court put together some 14-line poem, and people went, oh, wow, that's really cool, and said, yes, we must make this a thing, and and teach it all over Italy. So fast forward about, I want to say about like 50 years or so, somewhere between 20 and 50 years, and Petrarch is born in Tuscany. And Petrarch, his dad was like super duper smart, and so forced him to go to school, which pissed Petrarch off to no end. I was reading up on him a little bit. But because he was forced into going to school, and even though he thought it was a waste of time in a lot of ways, he ended up learning this sonnet format, and it stuck with him. Petrarch did a lot of other things that put in motion a lot of ideas that made possible the Renaissance about 100 years later. Probably like 50 years later, because he died when he was like 70. And then like 20 years later, 30 years later, like I said, dates, not important to me, but 20, 30 years later, the printing press was invented, so praise be to Gutenberg, and boom, Renaissance. So Petrarch and Dante and a bunch of other Italian poets at the time really solidified the sonnet format in Italy. So then printing press, Renaissance, Italy is like the epicenter of all culture and awesomeness at that time, which was pretty cool for them. So in the 1500s, early to mid 1500s, a couple of English guys go, hey, that's where it's happening. And specifically, Sir Thomas Wyatt, interesting fellow, and Henry Howard, Earl of Surrey. Those two, probably not together, but, separately and probably close, around about the same time, went down to Italy, found out about this thing called the sonnet, and went, wow, that's really fucking awesome. Only, much more, like, awesome. And they started translating Italian sonnets into English, which did not go well, because if you know anything about Italian versus English, it is so much easier to rhyme in Italian. It is so much easier to rhyme in almost any Latin language, like Latin-based language, than it is to rhyme in English. Like Spanish, Italian, Portuguese, even French. It's so much easier to rhyme in those languages. I don't know about German or anything, because I don't know that, but these much more where everything ends in oh and ah and stuff like that. It's so much easier to rhyme. But bless Wyatt and Earl of Surrey, Sir Thomas Wyatt and Earl of Surrey, they tried. They really did. And I guess they must have gotten frustrated, because then they started writing their own sonnets. Fun fact about Thomas Wyatt, actually, he was enamored of Anne Boleyn, who was Henry VIII's second wife. He was very enamored of her, and he did not like Henry. Of course, not a lot of people did like Henry. But he wrote a fair few sonnets about Anne Boleyn, and I think ultimately that cost him his life, and hers, to be honest, because, Henry VIII, a little bit of a homicidal bastard. So fun fact about that. So, but because it's Sir Thomas Wyatt and Henry Howard, Earl of Surrey, because of them bringing that back to England, it eventually sparked the English Renaissance. Well, helped fan the flames. Probably there was some other stuff going on, especially with the break from the Catholic Church. But the sonnet sort of made it to England, and eventually and the format went into the hands of William Shakespeare. Yes. And Shakespeare wrote a lot of sonnets. And I mean, we're going to get into Shakespeare's sonnets this month, specifically, because I don't have time nor the desire to look over Petrarchan or Wyatt or any other sonnets. Plus, Shakespeare, it's my homeboy, yo. So, yeah. So it gets in the hands of Shakespeare. Shakespeare does what Shakespeare does best and makes it awesome. And To me, that's the gold standard.